Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2019 AWS Public Sector Summit in Washington, D.C. My name is Shalisa Chambliss, and I will be your room host today. I just have a couple of quick announcements before we get started. Number one, I want to make sure that everyone has downloaded the AWS America's Events app. This is where you can build your schedule, most importantly, complete your surveys of the sessions that you've attended, and also just engage with the event overall. All these sessions are being recorded, so please at this time, if you just take a moment to silence all of your devices. During the Q&A session, there will be a microphone in the center of the room. Please approach that microphone if you have any questions. The title of this particular session is Mission Mobility, Changing How and Where Real Mission Work is Done. And I'd like to welcome to the stage John DiTommaso, Business Development Manager, AWS Mobility, to introduce our speakers.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We've got a great session for you over the next 50 minutes or so. We're going to talk to you about extending the cloud to the tactical edge. And with that as an introduction, I want to introduce our speakers today. Harold Smith, Chris Gorman. They're both with the company named Monkton, an AWS partner that did a project for the U.S. Air Force. And today we have Major General Cedric George here with us. Okay, so as we all know, moving your data, your information to the cloud provides a way historically for individuals or communities of users that are sitting at a desk from a desktop computer. And what we've done is we've really gone that extra mile now to look at functional communities and figure out how can we extend what's in the cloud today out to the tactical edge. And we're doing that via mobile devices. So when you think about in our personal lives how ubiquitous using our smartphone has become, or our tablet, throughout our daily tasks. The same way when you need a car, you click your Uber app and a car appears, or if you need to make a hotel reservation, you go to your Marriott app and you book a room. The list goes on and on. What we're attempting to do is to invest in moving information, again, in the cloud, and not just providing the capability to our office-based users, but pushing it out to the tactical edge. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you, both Monkton as well as General George from the Air Force, about a project that we did for the Air Force named BRICE. We'll go into detail from Monkton's perspective as far as what were the specific things that needed to occur along the path from where the Air Force was to ultimately where they were able to go with BRICE. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Gorman. Oh, I'm sorry. We're doing the video first. Sorry, Chris. So we're going to show you a quick 58-second video, and the video is going to talk to you and show you a project, show you a little about the project we did while at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base out in Arizona.
BRICE Act was built to get at how do we document maintenance at the point of use. Air Force Logistics understands that mobile, disconnected operations, big data analytics, cloud-based computing, these are some of the elements that must be a common denominator in future wars. I can prove out the ability to build a mobile maintenance app. It allows me to get a platform that's secure by which I can build other apps that confront pain points across our logistics community. We have worked hard to break down barriers. We have worked extremely hard to move from a no because, and the reasons why we can't get it done, to a yes-if environment where we are focusing on what will it take to make the art of the possible happen.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome General Cedric George to the stage. Thanks, General George.
Good afternoon. You can't see it, but I'm blushing, right? These guys are, come on, guys. That's fantastic. Let me do the same that you've done for me. We have the blessing of having Major Jonathan Jordan in the audience. Jonathan, stand up. It is his can-do attitude as he led a bunch of young maintainers, and we'll hear more about that. Master Sergeant Brighton comes to mind. I exist so that these young maintainers can be successful. I want you to hear about Bryce, but more importantly, I want you to hear about how we have to fuel the innovation that is in the DNA of every airman, and this airman definitely represents that. He is our bright and shining future, because quite candidly, we have got to move this outstanding, your Air Force, the best Air Force on the planet, bar none. And there's some former airmen in the crowd. So good to see you again. The best Air Force on the planet, into a place where we transition from the industrial base Air Force, or the industrial age Air Force that I joined, to a digital age Air Force. And we are there in some spaces, but I would simply tell you, there in the log business, we are still signing off aircraft the way I signed it off when I joined the Air Force in 1980. I know it's the last session, but I'm not going to tell you everything. We have got to do better. Our airmen demand better. They demand better of us. And so, Major Jordan, you are the hero. If I've messed something up, you can correct it afterwards, but I want to represent you well. I want to put this next slide up. Let's see if they trained me well here. Look at that. It worked. Something that I always do, and it's true, and we must never forget this. Long before you and I woke up this morning, and I can guarantee you, long after we go to bed tonight, America's airmen will be doing our nation's business all across the globe. Make no mistake. I'm not going to read the chart to you, but you see how busy we are. I think it's lost on a lot of people how large this Air Force logistics enterprise is. It's massive. It is massive. But the truth of the matter is, we are getting the mission done, navigating across hundreds of legacy IT systems. And quite candidly, in the case of Bryce, which you're going to hear about in more detail, we are doing and documenting maintenance like we did back in the day. And so I blink my eyes, and all of a sudden, I'm the old guy. I'm Yoda up here telling stories. But the Air Force has to move into the digital age. And again, folks like Major Jordan are expecting us to do that. Let me be clear with you, and you know this. Your Air Force has been in fact, Major Jordan, you represent the young airmen. 80% of the airmen that have come in the Air Force now came in after 9/11. Major Jordan is now a major. So they came in after 9/11. 80% of our Air Force, they're digital natives. They're digital natives. They expect and demand a digital Air Force. So you can imagine when I go, hey, welcome to the best Air Force on the planet, and then I send them off to sign off a jet, and they're signing it off in paper forms, and then marching back to the back shop to close it out in a legacy maintenance information system. You can imagine they'll do it for some time, but they won't do it for long. And guess what? The more demanding thing is the enemy gets a vote. And so since we talk about 9/11, let me just bridge there. 18 years of consecutive combat operations, let me tell you what's happened. Our enemies have simply watched us. And if you think they're going to allow us to, I jokingly say this, but it's serious. I remember as we staged, and I see good friends Phil that were there with me, we staged to go into OIF and Desert Shield and Desert Storm. When I talk to young airmen, they say, Desert Shield, Desert Storm? I go, yes, Vietnam, come on. And they go, okay, I get it. It's that long ago, they don't even know what Desert Shield and Desert Storm is. But when we stage, I want to tell you that the enemy is not going to let us move all of our supplies, move everything forward, in essence, stretch, do yoga, Pilates, do practice runs outside the mission area, and then commence to fight. They're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. It's gone. They've seen the playbook, and they won't let us go back there. The enemy gets a vote. They are going to attack us in where we live, right, which is in this space called log data. And so they are going to attack us across logistics IT, which is our log IT systems, our mainframes, those industrial age mainframes. They're going to attack us in our OT, which is our SCADA, all of those facilities, and they're going to attack those mission platforms. And so they'll come across all of those vectors trying to get at. And the closer we get into this, and I'll see if this pointer works, JD. Look at that. The closer we get to that fight, inside the highly contested, the more difficult it'll be. And so the Air Force I joined, we would stand off in our sanctuaries outside of the fight, and we would launch into the fight. Those days are gone. I see airmen in the crowd who remember this vividly. Some of our operations will be able to stage back here, but most of them will be, a lot of our fight's gonna have to be inside. We'll have an outside, but we'll have an inside. What's important, you go, why is all this important with Bryce and why are we talking about it? Because I have to have the ability to ingest, digest, and then gain insight from my data. And the more I complicate the ability to record that data, the more complicated it is for me to do what we consider agile operations, which is continuous, multiple choreographed dilemmas created to defeat the enemy. That's the pace of combat operations right now. That's how we're gonna do it. So where did Bryce come from? It came from these young maintainers asking me as the logistics CIO at the time, what if we could ensure that the way I do and ingest data in my private life aligns to the way it happens inside the Air Force? And so that question led to joining up with best of breed industry, which you'll hear about, you've heard from JD, with can you in fact bring my legacy IT system to the point of maintenance? Can you create a secure mobile app, which for many of you sitting in the audience, you go, this is child's play. Why are we talking about this? I would simply tell you it is an unnatural act inside of our Air Force. Not the technology, it is the culture, and we'll talk about that. I hope you ask me about that in the Q&A. Moving the culture to an agile mindset, agile DevOps mindset, and making sure that this stuff happens like it does in our life. And so you'll hear about that in a few minutes. So this was a compelling case. I brought in 4,000 new maintainers into the Air Force in the last year. They're all very young. And so we need to quickly turn and allow them to leverage an app that is intuitive. We need to allow them to be able to do the maintenance, the work they do, right on the point of maintenance and do maintenance actions. And so that seemed pretty simple. But Chris, come on up and tell us how you took that problem statement and now turned it into actual action. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So part of our approach to looking at how do we build that mobile app that was going to allow that mainframe system of record data to make its way out to the flight line was to do so not so much as a one-off. There are tons of projects that fill the graveyards of one-offs that kind of get spun up and never really go anywhere once they kind of get that initial operating capability. The thought was, how do we shift security to the left? How do we allow the things that are always the inhibitors to actually getting over that ATO wall, to getting over that assessments that come from really good ideas from the field, from the people that Major Jordan and his colleagues had served with? Here's a better, faster, smarter way to do it. And then it dies this death of trying to get through the proper security, the proper authentication, the way to lock the data down for transit at rest. So our approach was, what if we were to approach this from the idea of a secure platform that met the mandatory security requirements up front, and then you could iterate those ideas, those concepts in a way that would give you a predictable, repeatable outcome each and every time. So when you brought your CISO, your ISO, your ISM, your security personnel into the conversation, they would already know what that expectation was going to be. It would match the code that was written. And so now your ability to take those concepts out of IT and put them into the hands of the operators is shortened. So what are the security policies that mandatorily need to be addressed? Well, we started with, in DoD, Common Criteria, which is an international standard recognized by 28 of our allied nations around the world. The implementation of Common Criteria here in the United States is called NIAP, run by the NSA. And DoD in 2017 decided that rather than constantly reinventing the wheel and trying to determine what is secure enough, we would pick a standard. And the standard that they rightfully went with, thanks to Dr. John Zangardi, was looking at managed apps. So things that I think JD mentioned, like you're booking a Uber or kind of looking at your Marriott reservations, could still be done, on these devices, but they'd meet a lower level of security. Anything that would be truly mission enabling or have sensitivity associated with the data now had a standard that everybody could see, everybody could contribute to, and now we knew before code was written what the eventual assessment was going to be once you got to that endpoint. So all of your security could be baked in or at least incorporated into the design. So Wendy Fairfield's here in the audience, came up with this idea of kind of branding this around the notion of secure by standards. And so what are those standards and what do they mean? And I would argue that there are three kind of foundational pillars. These are not so much barriers to entry, but these should be the building blocks that you have for every single modern mobile cloud system. And they're really incorporated into three different areas. Identity, how do I know Chris is who he claims to be? How do I then validate that to make sure that he is the one getting access to the information? From the standpoint of mobile, we go back to, again, the DoD and the NSA policy of what is secure enough per the definition in Common Criteria and NIAP. And then as we work our way into cloud services, we have not a linear, not a binary kind of black or white, 1 or 0, but we have a progressive, transitional way to kind of look at what is the right use case for things that are in the public domain. And where are the uses for tools like low-code solutions or web apps that are perfectly reasonable for things that are in the public domain. But as you work your way into true mission data, things that are actually helping our airmen go through the things that they need with the information and the data, we have to start looking at the proper policies as our building blocks, whether that's identity and authentication coming out of NIST, whether it is kind of the stack of the mobile device, the operating system, the app coming out of NIAP, and then working our way through the FedRAMP and cloud computing SRG levels that Amazon has invested in so that now you have true end-to-end compliance before you start your prototyping. So the term Pathfinder has been used a lot lately, and I would argue that what we set out to do here was really kind of close to kind of where we were with the Louisiana Purchase. At that point in time, we had a ton of opportunity. We had President Jefferson kind of saying, this is where we should go. And we had our, Meriwether Lewis, and Harold, we'll let you be William Clark here. But at that point in time, in 1804, there were no maps that went beyond St. Louis. Everything else after that was going to be an exploration. And the general had mentioned that it was industry and it was government working together to overcome these obstacles. Every Tuesday at 12:30, we had a stand-up call that had 65 to 70 people from probably 9 different organizations on it. And we set out what are the problems? Who is going to take ownership? How do we work our way through that? And it was only because of everybody coming together to forge a new path that we were able to kind of build out the first DoD app that works both disconnected and connected, that met the requirements for disappearbread for authentication, that was able to connect to the Air Force's cloud computing environment based on Amazon running in their IL4 services, meeting all of the technical roadmaps that would then allow us to connect to that old 1980 Unisys mainframe system, and now everything working end-to-end, back and forth. So to dig deeper into kind of how we went about doing this, I'm going to have Harold Smith come to the stage. He's going to spend a few moments going through the details of what the actual architecture was and some of the things that, again, anyone could replicate taking these lessons learned. Green button is next. Yep.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's probably the first time other than 3 people have seen me wear a tie. So, so there are really 4 big components that a notional architecture of something like Brice. There is the mobile application itself, the connectivity to get back to your data center, where we deployed our middleware / rebar hub that lives in Amazon GovCloud, and then your old legacy mainframe. So I don't know how familiar you are, most of you, with a lot of these older DoD systems. A lot of them are old legacy COBOL systems that were built in the early 80s that reside in DISA decks. Their performance isn't all that great, and they're hard to get to if you're an airman. And as Major General George and Chris had talked about, it takes an airman 1 to 3 hours every day to walk back and forth on the aircraft to the terminal to either get data out or put data in. So that alone is a big hindrance to our Air Force. So when we look at the mobile application itself, we built it from scratch, focusing on the user interface and the business logic that goes into that, leveraging our product, Rebar. With that, we were able to really focus on how do we solve this business problem, not how do we solve all the policy and compliance that goes into that. Everything from authorization, data at rest, data in transit, that's all just taken care of. And we can really start on the 5-yard line and figure out how do we help our customer, in this case, the Air Force, get to where it needs to be. We work with Verizon on this. Part of what A4 has been working on is how do we get LTE to bases? It's great to say, oh, we want to put LTE on bases so airmen can check, whatever it is that 18-year-olds look at on their phones. But that really isn't a compelling use case to build and put LTE on bases. But if I have a mission need where I can get my tactical data to my maintainers, then you get the the runoff benefit of, well, now my airmen that work on the base can actually get to some of their personal data. Then we're punching back to Amazon GovCloud, so we're using all IL4 services in the GovCloud, Beanstalk, MySQL RDS, S3, VPCs, so the whole stack of services you find in Amazon in the Air Force CC Common Computing environment. So we're one of the first cloud native applications to be deployed in there, and it was a lot of fun to work with the team at Isobar to get there. And then finally, going from AWS GovCloud into that legacy DISA-DEC, we were lucky enough that there were SOAP XML web services available. So leveraging a cloud access point called GCDS, we were able to punch from AWS to those legacy web services without a problem. And that cloud access point also sits between the mobile application and AWS as well, so those ingresses are protected. One of the big and most interesting things about this project was this wasn't IT saying, we need to build this and this is how it's going to be. We actually were lucky enough to have 6 enlisted maintainers and a lieutenant colonel fly out to Apple's Enterprise Design Lab. This is sort of a invite-only kind of environment where Apple tries to help enterprises build good mobile software that performs exceptionally well. The interesting part was Apple basically told the lieutenant colonel, please go sit in the corner. We would like to just listen to the airmen. And that's what it was. It was 3 days of, what are your guys' pain points? They want to know, if you're an airman, what do you do the first thing when you come into the office in the morning? Do you get coffee? How do you go check out your tools? How do you do everything you do after your day of, what is the process when you go visit an aircraft? And the outcome of that was we walked away with about 85%. In 3 days of work, we walked away with 85% of the application that you would see today there. So, some of these big integrators that say that process should have taken 9 months, it took 3 days, and it's fantastic. We're able to give this iPad application to maintainers from 18-year-old to 55 and older, and they can figure it out. 5-10 minutes for an 18-year-old, this is easy. Master Sergeant Brierton in one of the UAT sessions asked, what kind of training do you think you should have? And one of the maintainers that had been there for 3 years said, I think computer-based training would be good. Master Sergeant Brierton, I don't want the Air Force answer. What do you think? And he said, just give it to me in an hour. I'll have it figured out. So that's the value of design focused on the end user versus IT pushing down what they think it should be. Just a little bit about how we work with iOS and AWS. What we really focused on in this project was, what is the user interface? What is the business logic to interface with that legacy system? The data at rest, data in transit, authentication, authorization, that's all taken care of by Rebar itself, so we didn't have to focus on any of that. We plugged into DISA Purebred automatically. It was just a configuration setting to use PKI. And then we built a set of custom microservices that get deployed in Amazon Web Services that are that bridge between the mobile device and that legacy system. So, some advice I'd like to impart on the audience: if you have to interface with something legacy, figure out how you can build a lightweight set of services to sort of transform your data back and forth. And the benefit of what we did was we flew through a NIAP assessment with an approved common criteria test lab, DISA DMUC, Defense Defense Mobile and classified capability, yes. They're hosting it on their store. They assessed it and found no issue. They found one issue, and it was the code we got from them, but we helped them fix it. So they're a great team. So nothing but goodness there, and everything server side deployed in AWS GovCloud. Real quick slide, what the user sees, there's a whole slew of things underneath, everything from the deployment to integrating with the legacy system. Our goal was, in the end, the user should not know that this application is IMDS. It should just be Bryce, and that's what they think, and that's how they see. So, another takeaway is a lot of the hard work we have done. Now it's how do we build upon this capability to say, okay, what are the next 3 things that we need to do to help improve the lives of our maintainers and improve our mission efficiency within the Air Force to, as General George says, be the most lethal force on the planet. Path to production. This was actually rapidly done. Within 3 months and 15 days, we went from coming out of Apple's design lab to being in user acceptance testing. That was, if anybody's done work in the DoD, we outpaced, I think, everybody's expectations of where we could be in that time. It took about 6 to 7 months to get the authority to operate taken care of. So within a calendar year, we went from contract kickoff, design, to being fully, having a full authority to operate. So my takeaway, I hope for everybody, is this stuff can be done, and you can do it in a compliant manner, and you can have great buy-in from your end users. Thank you, sir.
So, so now we expect this as the price of doing business when we engage with industry. So less about Bryce, more about a standard repeatable process for deploying a secure app in the United States Air Force. And while Bryce is our first prototype, I would simply tell you the results are outstanding. Our user, that wasn't a staged opening video. I didn't know you guys were going to do it in that way. They were taking a bunch of shots and doing all kinds of things. How very special that you would do this for our Air Force. We were actually out at DM doing a scrum, if you will, and just talking to the user. And it was really neat to get this kind of feedback. So I won't read the slide to you, but what I would tell you is a couple of things were happening. One, you had a user community that's saying we want it. And we knew this was, actually I think there was a little bit of surprise that the Air Force would actually hear a pain point and bring a team together to deliver results that mattered in record time. We're talking something like this would take well, I'm being generous, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7, you guys figure out. We would, in fact, still be kind of working through requirements. The Agile DevOps approach says, I kind of have an idea of a pain point. If you get me on the train, I can continue to iterate, and I can continue to deliver value that matters. And so it was less about technology, I want you to hear this, and more about the culture. While I appreciate your words, Harold, what I would tell you is there were transformations inside of this transformation. The ATO 6 months was all about trying to get the no police on board, is what I call them. And these are brothers and sisters that mean well, and they hold the security in their core hands and protect our data in rest and transit, but trying to ensure that we could get on this platform and actually get things done. So I would just offer to you that is something I would tell you is an ongoing process. Technology is not the problem here, it's the culture. As I see a lot of heads nodding, it's the culture. And we have the same phenomena going on that you have, right? Top leadership says, go faster. Think big, start small, go fast. The field says, I want it. I have real pain points, get going. You know what the challenge is. It's the middle. And by the way, I always tell people this. There are some general officers and SESs in the frozen middle. They're not all like GS 7s and 3s and 5s and staff sergeants. There are general officers who go, never in my Air Force. So how do you move the entire frozen middle, however big it is, through to a point of, as I said now you're making me famous. My girls will love this when I go home tonight and goes, Daddy is quoting himself as I said in the video, thanks JD, from no because to yes if. And I will tell you, our airmen, Major Jordan, you can in the Q&A pile on, want this badly. This being the ability to move, have data track with the actual work that's happening. They want it. They won't accept anything less. It is a readiness issue and it is a retention issue. You can imagine how much it cost me to train a stealth maintainer. And then to tell a stealth maintainer that I'm going to have you transcribe because the system that we have is not, I want you to transcribe all that and then go back and input it into a system. They look at me like I'm crazy. They'll do it, but they won't do it for long. And we have got to get at that. There's all kinds of pain points to JD's point earlier. So it's resounding. What's more important than the time savings, so JD mentioned, and I think Chris mentioned that anywhere from, and Harold, you as well, 1 to 3 hours to do it the way we have. We're seeing about 50 minutes to an hour savings using, as you see there, using what we have there. There is no OJT, there's no computer-based training. It's intuitive. Pick it up, get going, giddy up. And so very, very impressive. Now we have all of the neat problems that you would expect to have, right, with something that's working. How do you scale where? We have 100 users at Davis Moffett on the A-10, the Warhog. Any former, like, so you know it, the Warhog. Most people go, whoa. That is one impressive machine. When it rolls in, people, I mean, bad things happen. So the Warhog rolls in, and it sounds really quiet, whoo, until it gets overhead, and then it just rains down a whole bunch of iron, right? Warheads on foreheads. So what I would tell you is it took a village, and I think it was captured by Harold and Chris, a lot of people on board. My role was simply to drink chai and to keep everybody moving along in the right place. Literally, I tell people, let's not joke. I was the chai drinker and the connector and making sure that people stayed in the yes if. The moment we sniffed out a sucking molar, I can't do this, I rolled in with my chai and said, tell me what I'm missing and how do we get to yes, back to yes if, okay? That's very important. So we're really excited about what's happening. We have 100 users at DM right now. 100 more will be added by the end of June. 100 more will be added at DM, and we are now in the necessary discussions about how and where to scale next. The Air Force Reserve Command, I call them the brightest innovators in our Air Force. They were the ones that took this on. We have now moved into Air Combat Command. Any former TAC or Air, yeah, I heard the hula. Air Combat Command is now is now receiving the first set of users on this app, and we expect to continue to use it. Let me finish off here and just simply tell you that not a whole lot of money. You don't see the millions and hundreds of millions of dollars dropped, close to billions of dollars dropped into an IT acquisition where we end up with nothing. Those days are gone. We will not accept that. We will demand that we get output for the dollars, and the price of admission is you better deliver value or you will not tangle with the best Air Force on the planet. That is just simply how we do it. We're excited about what's happening. That's a brand new maintainer. Let me finish here by saying brand spanking new to the Air Force. That's one of the 4,000 that came in. He picked up the app and immediately started using it. In fact, he is closing out a battery change. That aircraft landed, taxied into the chocks. It's squawk code 3 battery. Code 3 is I'm broke. Code 1 is I'm good to go. You can fly me again. Code 1 hard broke, taxied in, chalked, and that brand new maintainer, not the 5 to 7 years. In a matter of time, he picked it up, changed the battery, opened the job, closed it, done. That's what the best Air Force on the planet does, and we continue to stretch the limits on what can be done. That's the Air Force that he's going to likely stay in. I won't keep him for as long as I stayed in for 32 years. But in his 5 to 7 years, he is going to rock it. And he is going to create at least 3 or 4 of these apps on his own if we do this right. Right? And so with that, let me pass off, and I think we're almost done. I can't wait to hear the Q&As that come out of this. I think this is the last transition. We're actually trying to wear you out to see how many speakers we can put in front of you, and I think we're doing all right here.
Just making sure you keep paying attention. So we've attempted to take the lessons learned coming out of the BRICE project, out of the architecture, and manifest that in a way that this can become a repeatable process. Not so much just within the Air Force, but really anywhere. And it wasn't just the companies that participated in the delivery of the particular capability described within BRICE, but we are now seeing a variety of vendors, there's probably close to 20, who are buying into the concept of shift security to the left. I'm already supporting from my product roadmap the standards that matter, and now we can work together, even where we compete, to deliver consistent outcomes. Because although we may be competing for certain business, our true competition is North Korea, is China, is Iran, is Russia. This is the true competition that is looking for any vulnerability, any spot that they can get into the architecture, and these companies joining the Mission Mobility Consortium are all on board with supporting the standards that matter. Well, what does this mean ultimately? It means we are trying to change the conversation on what we prototype, how we prototype, by taking the conversation out of IT and to the functional community, to the people that Major General George had just described, who are brand new coming in, and ask them, how can we do things better, faster, smarter? If we change both how and where work is permissible, whether that is at sensitive information, supporting national security systems, or even classified. How do we do this in a disconnected state? How do we access things like AWS GovCloud or C2S even? How do we kind of capture that information using an intuitive UI and design process? How do we do this to where processing of the data is now occurring locally there, storing when we are away from LTE areas, but then as soon as we get back in, that information is being pushed. It's being processed now successfully, and we're getting situational awareness back down to our mobile users so that they can make the next decision within whatever their workflow is. We've manifested this into this idea, going back to secure by standards, that if we look at this predictable process that we have gone through with BRICE, we can take this factory-like approach to where you can have interoperability with any mobile device manufacturer that has gone through a NIAP independent evaluation, that has gone through and a STIG assessment. And there are 4 or 5 of them. There's not 1 or 2. We have Apple, we have Samsung, we have LG, we have GTAC. You have choices. Same thing with MDM. There are at least 4 or 5 that are all adhering to the same FedRAMP and NIAP standards. Harold talked a little bit about the consistency of always bringing user design into this process. Have your actual functional community be the ones determining what this is going to do and how it's going to work. You have a sliding scale depending on public-facing, sensitive, or getting into national security or classified of what your cloud environment looks like. And so take your pick of whatever companies meet these standards, but don't degrade the standards, because you will then lose the ability to move fast, have predictive outcomes, and then most importantly, get that net new capability into the hands of your functional community. And who is your functional community? It is not just the maintainers. It is the same process that we are looking at, whether that is supply chain. We have some folks here from the Army who are doing phenomenal work in asset management already in the field. Raise your hand, Army team. If anybody has questions on what the Army is doing, come see them after. But looking at where we bring medical into this, whether it's frontline through evac all the way back to rehab, how we're handling HR and recruiting, and as we start working our way into more traditional law enforcement and operations activities. So we're going to take a look with a couple minutes here of one of these use cases where typically we've been talking today about bringing the cloud to the tactical edge. Well, in some scenarios, that won't work. So what do we do when we actually need to bring the cloud in a more portable way? For those of you who are already familiar with a Snowball Edge, you're going to be one of the few to actually see a real-time demo here. Harold, are you good? Yep. All right. Where we're going to look at an app built using these same BRICE architecture, the same mission mobility standards, perform an action, connect back to that Snowball Edge, and these are all things that you could throw in a Humvee, in a submarine, on a ship, but bringing that cloud out to the tactical edge to do your processing and storage. Good.
Yeah, if you guys can switch it over. So, am I on? Can you hear me? So, if you guys can see, there's this suitcase sitting on the stage. This is Amazon's. Hey, everybody can come see later. This is Amazon's Snowball Edge device. This one has 100 terabytes of storage, and I think is it 50 gigs of RAM and 23 cores in it. What we've done is installed our middleware on that. So there's a database, our service stack. We built a custom set of microservices, and we built an app which I hope works. It's going to log us in. Yeah, so here we go. So we're authenticated. We can do PIV as well. So I can show everybody a YubiKey demo. We worked with the company Yubico to leverage the PIV credentials on Android. So I can just pop the device in there and authenticate without, and there's my screensaver. I blame MDM for that. So we authenticate. I come in here, agree. This is our app called Snowcone to go with Snowball. Yeah, you can tie it all together. We've already asked for the camera permission here. I'm going to refresh and see what we've already entered. This is a very, very simple mobile application, but it's more to demo the capabilities. So I'm going to come in here, add a new item. We'll give the title PSS, Hello World. Yeah. And then we'll capture an image real quick, wave. Save. And hit save item here. So it's going to go push all this information to the Snowball. There we have it. And I can come in here to Harold's face. You can see me in my office. So here we are. So what we're doing here is it's storing that metadata in a Redis database that resides on there, and then it's storing the images we're actually capturing on the S3 buckets that live on there. So when you ship the Snowball back to Amazon, all that data in S3 is automatically going to be imported into your Snowball or your S3 buckets. So you can do data processing on there, what have you. So, this isn't a very complex demo, as you can see. But, imagine you're in the middle of Iraq and, you're in a Humvee and you need some kind of mobile capability for the force you have fighting. Or maybe I'm in a submarine where, you can't just go plug new hardware into the network. But if I had a series of routers in one of these devices, I can start to capture data. I can process data locally. One of the other variants of the Snowball has 200 gigs of RAM on it, 52 cores, and GPUs on there. So you can really do intensive data processing on these devices. And that's really the value. So when you think of, what can I do with a mobile device when I'm out in the field? Maybe you're even FEMA or ICE, CBP, out on the border. This device can make it all happen, and we've collectively built the capabilities to extend those to where people actually do their work, not hours and days later when they're done. So that's it. And I think is this Q&A time now?
Yeah, we're ready for Q&A.
So what's on your mind? That was a spinoff of the BRICE, which says disconnected operations. What happens if I want to take a 2-ship off of a squadron? I just want to ingest the data I need and then move off and do something else. The Army has the exact same. You send a special operations unit forward. I want to spin up my data environment, spin down, and then move on. Go black, disconnect, and move off. I have the exact same challenge with a 2-ship, 4-ship, you name it. And so we are not, by the way, again, this is not a technological problem. It's already solved. The question is, how do you operationalize this technology? Just like we did laser-guided bombs, GPS, stealth, the list goes on and on. I believe this is our next force multiplier, and we have got to leverage it. We absolutely have to leverage it. It's in this room, it's all across this country, and we have to operationalize it if we are going to win a war of cognition. We've already won, and we can win a war of attrition. The question is, can we win a war of cognition? And all of the tools, techniques, and procedures, the tactics are right here in this room. And so we as a nation have to get this figured out. Every branch of our service, every branch of our nation in the DoD needs it. And so we must win a war of cognition. I think there's a question out there. So I'll go over here. I'm going to move away. I think I'm going over here.
Not any better.
Not any better?
Bend down to get to the microphone. Thank you, Major General and the team for, that was an awesome presentation. I was at MITS down in Montgomery about 2 years ago. I think I heard you talked about the Agile concept then and the transformation then. My question, having done a lot of safe Agile transformation in the commercial space, is what the Air Force leadership has, having that start with the leadership team, right, even though there's the frozen middle, being educated, what has the Air Force done to build that into their educational process, whether that's at Air University or individual discussions? Is there a plan around that to go on that journey? Because that's a journey.
Yeah, thanks. Great question, and I appreciate those comments. We have, in fact, National Defense University is sitting right up front. It is all across our curriculum. You know this, right? I want to move beyond a head knowledge of Agile DevOps to a heart knowledge of Agile DevOps across the entire ecosystem. And so the challenge is that what happens is you have one silo of leadership that absolutely supports it, except I need this is too big, as you know, to do by myself. And so you guys laughed when I talked about drinking chai, going over to the A6, into our A6 community and the G6 and going, I need your help, right? And so the leadership has to be able to be aligned and fully bought in, top to bottom, side to side, or it won't happen. And so while Harold described this 6 months smooth, there were some rocky roads. I will tell you, there were some times where it almost came off the tracks. And it's, to your point, the culture, I call it, again, tongue-in-cheek, the no police that simply say, not on my watch. I have a head knowledge of Agile. In fact, when you start to listen to them, as you certainly suggest you understand, they actually have a head knowledge of Waterfall Light. They have a head knowledge of Agile Light. They have a cursory, I call it Sunday school knowledge of Agile DevOps, and they think Agile DevOps is what industry does. No, Agile DevOps is what we do, and we commit to do that forever. If we're going to build an Agile train that has Agile governance, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, that everybody buys into. So we are putting it into, and there are people that are way smarter than I am on the taxonomy of learning. So we're laying it in, we're at level 1, where people go, I have a head knowledge, I got this. What I would tell you is one of the things I did as a CIO is I would drag everybody out to places like you just heard so that we could go and see it. And then you drop your airmen right in the middle of it and they can experience it. And once they experience it, like those 6 that went out to Apple, they are never the same. You know it. They are never the same, and they will not tolerate, if you just give me 6 years and a whole bunch of money, I'll get you some minimal viable product. I don't think so. They won't tolerate it. So we're in the middle of the movie would be the answer. And you would say you're right on the right track. That's about what happens as you move culture. The problem is, back to that chart, the enemy's not waiting for us to get our act together. They're just not going to wait for us. You know it. And so we have got to move with the speed, I call it the speed of combat operations, the speed of need, and the speed of relevance in this space. So let me stop and see if there's other thoughts along this line.
If I could maybe share one of the activities that occurred while we were at that summit at Davis Monkton back in March. After being on the flight line and kind of going, seeing how it was working, we brought maybe 20 to 30 kind of maintainers back in the room, and General George led a session asking, tell me what you honestly think.
And they will do that.
And they were a little shy at first, but as soon as they got going, you couldn't stop them.
No.
And coming out of that, they were like, oh, we wish it would do this. And there were some weapons, folks that were like, hey, we need, something that's going to take care of all of our needs. And it went on for a good 45 minutes, to an hour where, at least I walked out of it like, this is fantastic. We're getting direct feedback. But as we were going back out to the flight line, I had another kind of senior officer approach me like, oh, this is a disaster. They hate it. They've kind of gone off with like all these things that it doesn't do. And that, to me, was just, again, the cultural representation of what is Agile, what is the idea of putting something out there, committing to an iterative design where you are getting that feedback, you are building in now version 1.1, you're getting feedback, you're going 1.2, you're prioritizing what goes into 2.0, and that type of feedback loop is mandatory. It's not, we're going to get all the requirements, we're going to build the perfect snapshot in time of what this app is and deliver it 2 to 3 years later and call victory. So changing the perspective of even feedback, again, are things within this project that we continue to try to educate and move forward in the right direction.
Yeah, Chris, that's a great point. The notion of fail fast, succeed fast is like, huh? That's what you are speaking of. There's a part of the folks that heard the same feedback and went, this is an absolute failure. And I go, yay. They're going, why are you clapping your hands? There was no failure, by the way. It was feedback on and learning to the point that was made. I simply said this in the group of like hydraulic covered, no nonsense. I mean, you know the maintenance community. We will tell it like it is. And so I told them, would you do me a favor? Let's hold this app to the same standard you hold your apps in your private life. We want our apps to do 1 or 2 things exceptionally well. Otherwise, we wait until the squiggly thing happens and then we delete it. If they don't do that, we'll delete it. And so what I would offer is I want to hold this app to the same standard. I want it to do 1 or 2 things exceptionally well. What Chris is describing is they had broken their own rule in their own private lives, which is you don't expect Uber to tell you how many steps. You don't want Uber to tell you how your swim went, right? You want Uber, for example, to just simply say, get my car here when I want it, Todd, and it better be this type of car, and I want to know where it's at, and then I want to know where I'm at in the process, right? And then I want to know what you charge me. I want full transparency. That's all I want the app to do. If it doesn't, delete. That's how it goes. So what I would offer is, to the point about learning, everybody's learning. So the users, all 40 of them went, that's right. I don't want Bryce to be a weapons. That's another app. I need to create another app to do in a better interface against the same database or some similar database, right? So that's the world they're going, oh yes, that's right. That's a different app. So even the user, to your point, is learning, and we are learning along the way. What I really appreciate has happened, the conversation is no longer, can you do this? It now is, now what do we do? So here's the conversation. I would call it moved from Sunday school to, we're not having GED discussions around secure mobile apps. We're having, I would call it baccalaureate discussions like, do you really want to be an insight-driven organization? Maybe that's even master's degree discussion. If so, what does that look like? What decisions do we want to make? What decision quality data do we want? Do we need? Where's it coming from? What's your confidence factor? Whoa. In my 32 years in the Air Force, I made a bunch of decisions, 3-time wing commander, with this right here, my gut feel. 30% accuracy, you know it. Use my experience, and I'm going to take you in and out of combat and bring you home, God willing. 30%, is that going to work at the speed of combat operations, which continues to accelerate? I don't think so. I'm going to have better insight against data, real data, not data that is trumped up, and I need real data, and I better have a better set of insight around that. So I think we're all learning. We're learning how to be an insight-driven organization against, they're collecting real data. You see the data accuracy? 2.5% error rate down to 0.5. That's just the first tranche. You can imagine it's going to get better and better, and we're all learning, and we're all realizing we're part of the data stream, and that data is a force multiplier. Let me finish by saying this. As important to me as fuel and ammunitions. Army? I won't win a war without fuel and ammunition. Data is the exact same thing. You will not win a war without data insight. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Great question. Yeah. What else is on your mind? You guys have been very generous in your time on the last session. First day. You made it. You are fantastic. What other questions? Other questions are on your mind? Yes, sir. I think they want you because they're recording. Because they'll blame me if you don't do that.
Sir, I was feeling very motivated by your talk about the app and Bryce. How does someone else get something like that started if they're not a 2-star?
Yeah. So maybe I messed up because this all I was the fuel behind a Master Sergeant Bryant and Major Jordan. These are the heroes. So what I would say is you already have it in your DNA because it starts with you asking what if. And then you need leadership to the point that was raised that needs to reinforce, I want you to ask what if. I want you to innovate. I want you to ask, could we do this differently? And to the point earlier about leadership environment, I think everybody's coming to this place. If actually Army, there's some Navy in the background, we're all realizing we have to transform our services from an industrial age speed to a digital age speed. And our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, coasties, CIA, picket, all of us are realizing we have to make this transition. What got us to where we were in this industrial age speed we won't survive in a digital age speed environment. So keep asking the questions, keep demanding that your leadership allow you to transform, because looking at you may be a young guy, you may be an older guy that looks young, but I suspect you're a young guy that is young, right? I tell you, this is what you expect. You're like my daughters who grew up in a digital age. They knew nothing but being connected. Any notion of being disconnected was just like a foreign. To give you an example, my daughter saw a phone hanging on the wall and said, "What was that? What's that?" They have no idea. They have no idea. So keep asking those questions. You have the answers we're looking for. We have maintainers that code in Python. They do. I mean, they're just hidden. They're all camouflaged and all that maintenance stuff, but they're actually innovators in disguise, and we just have to pull that out of them, right? I think, if I'm honest with you, I would say I was an accidental CIO. I showed up and surrounded myself with a bunch of really smart people. And I did what my father, who is a first sergeant in the United States Army, told me, which is start by listening. And so I listened to a bunch of airmen that said, "Sir, what if?" And then I said to industry, "What if?" And then this beautiful nexus of coming together to turn what if into actually value that matters. You have it too, just keep doing it. Keep asking the questions. Yeah, don't accept no. Maybe it's not now, but don't accept no. Fair enough? Yeah, good, outstanding. What else is on your mind? Besides the Spy Museum, some of you are going to the Spy Museum, and then a cold beer at the end of let me do a split second around, yeah, go ahead, sir. While you're coming to I don't want to shortchange the importance of culture. So if you've got questions around culture, ask about those. Yes, sir.
So yeah, really impressive topic you have here. My comment is this. So I think the agile iterative design process is really great. Commercial's been doing it for a long time. I think traditional aerospace companies, I mean, they want to do this. Mm-hmm. But the problem is a lot of these traditional acquisition processes, we're forcing some of these companies to follow a CDR, MDR, PDR type of process. And it really doesn't sort of, conform into the iterative design process. Yeah. What do you think about that, and if there's anything that can be done to kind of let traditional aerospace companies also get into game with that?
So I'm going to be demanding of you to say I wouldn't come to the same conclusion that some traditional aerospace companies actually practice Agile DevOps. Some are moving to, I call it step one in the 12 steps of whatever program that you do in recovery, right? Which is recognizing they have a problem and partnering with, I call it these Agile DevOps, machines and cultures, and they're actually delivering value in the kind of speed you're talking about. So I would suggest that they're not all there yet. Many of them still want to because they're listening to their customers. By the way, so now let me turn to us. Speak to the Air Force and stay in my lane. We are still, and that's why it wasn't just tongue in cheek, we are still acquiring even 21st century IT systems using waterfall. So you're exactly right. We're going to build this IT system like we would build a B-21 Raider or an F-35 stealth fighter. I go, it's nonsense, but we do it. And we don't have, in all cases, agile contracting, agile requirements, agile, everything you just talked about. So this is all about, quite candidly, the maintainers didn't know what they kind of had a pain point, and what they're doing is iterating on their requirements. They got way more, I won't tell you, we got way more than we went in with. I promised you we did. And they're now so comfortable with that they're pushing, which is exactly the tension you want. You're pushing the developers to continue to push. We have everything we need from Congress. I don't think I would say, we still need some colorless and just-in-time dollars. And I think all the services are pushing hard on that. What does that look like? So that we can, because you can't do this if you don't have agile funding, right? Here's an idea. And the ability to get access to, I don't know, call it venture capitalist money, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I need that. And so we're all making that case. But they've given us, I believe, everything we need in terms of policy. We just have to get out our own way. So it's not the policy, it's the culture that keeps stopping us. And the risk aversion, right, to do a large-scale IT system like you would do, as we described here, there's a lot of anxiety. By the way, there's hope. You heard from Kessel Run earlier in the day. So AOC 2.0, some of you are in the room that are helping us there, yay. Mad Hatter, there's some in the room that are helping us with Mad Hatter, yay. All those are my bright and shiny examples in the Air Force where we were actually building large scale and deploying on the fly capability. That's what we have to do. I won't accept as a customer anything less now. You will not roll in and ask me, or deliver to me a large-scale IT system in the way that we did it even 5 years ago. Won't accept it. So you have to continue to, I think what Chris just showed us is, I would ask you to partner. I can't tell you what to do. I would suggest you need to partner with folks who actually are truly doing Agile DevOps and merge and help present to us how best to do that. And then we have to continue to be rigorously demanding of ourselves to make sure we don't stop the Agile train. You throw something over, I should never be throw it over the wall, but that's what it feels like. I should be able to deliver back to you on the Agile train an ATO. I should be able to deliver back to you on the Agile train my testing on the fly, if any, right? That's what we are doing, and we're learning as we go. Great question. By the way, when you figure that out, if you have like the panacea for how to fix all this, you write the book, I will camp out at Starbucks and I'll be there for you to sign, to get a signature. Because this defies this, but we got to figure it out. You're right on with the right issues. What would you guys add?
So the other thing that we've kind of taken out of the, really kind of the lessons learned was that factory slide of being able to kind of distill what would be the investment, how do you get started? Instead of having, a large budget ask that has to be palmed or go through an OMB 300 or 53B process, and you're now 18 months out before you even get the funding to then have an RFI or a source to saw it, and now you're 6 months further down the road, start small. Start in a digestible kind of, easy, contracted, simplified acquisition procedure like thresholds. By having this idea of the choice of whatever kind of products you want, meeting those standards are there, but do it for 10 to 100 users. Build something out in maybe 3 to 4 dev sprints, but have something that is production ready at the end of it, and set your timing at not 2 years, but 2 months. You should have a minimum expectation of this being something that is going to be a fast project, but more importantly, it is a complete project. And 60 days, you can go from concept to a production-ready prototype, should you choose to go down that path for something at a sensitive or controlled unclassified information with consistency across all of your different potential kind of operational scenarios. And then you figure out which are the ones that make the most sense. How do we then kind of fund this, to actually go into limited production, and then how do we fund it to actually hit enterprise? And that's the progression, but you will then have metrics, you will have a success factor, you will be able to go into those other stakeholders, give them a Samsung tablet or an Apple iPad with something that's operational, and be like, this isn't a white paper, this isn't a PowerPoint briefing deck, here is something that works. Take it, use it. If you have questions, let me know. This is what we're going to go do to solve that mission problem. Not a tech problem, but a mission problem.
Yeah, great point.
All right, well, I'd like to thank Major General George,
Thanks, Harold.
Harold Smith, and Chris Gorman for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.